We have found former world champion Greg Raymer, who is in place in London to play the EPT. What are the big difference playing a European tournament compared to the American ones?
Actually, the biggest difference, aside from the travel difficulties and all that stuff, you got to get yourself over here. Which of course is the same thing when everyone from Europe comes to the World Series. They'll tell you the same. But the big difference really is that the quality of play is much stronger in Europe than it is in the American tournaments. We have a lot more casual players in the States. People who just play poker a little bit. They're not serious. They're not students of the game. They're not professionals. Here in Europe, you've got professionals and you've got serious players who are not professionals, and you don't have very many just completely casual players who just play a little bit with their friends. We just have so many millions of people like that in America, and then some of them make it to each of the big tournaments. So even though it's a small percentage of them that get to the tournament, it's such a big group to begin with, that small percentage is still a lot of the field. So we have these players that are very inexperienced, very easy to read, very easy to take advantage of. So, unless the short-term luck really hurts you, you're going to get these guys chips sooner or later. And so you've got kind of that reservoir of chips available to you. And that's just not the case when you come to Europe. Now, every chip is somewhat difficult to win.
Are there any difference in the actual style of play between Europeans and American players?
Well, because the Europeans, are more well trained on average, because we don't have any of those weak players. Good play is generally aggressive play. So the games tend to be much more aggressive here than the tournaments in the States. People call a lot more often in the U.S., and people here will tend to fold or re-raise.
Okay. It has been quite a few years since you won the World Championship. How do you think that the game has changed over those years?
It's actually kind of the same answer. The game has gotten a lot tougher. When I won, that was like basically the beginning of the poker boom. 03, 04, and 05, those were the poker boom years when things really took off big. And because of that boom, people started really looking at this game more seriously. I used to float back before the word float had been coined. No one used the word. And it was not something that hardly anyone ever did. And then, all of a sudden the poker boom happens, and then people are talking about floating, and I'm like, what are you talking about? And then they explain it to me, and I'm like, oh, yeah, I've been doing that for a long time. I just didn't know float was the word. And, but that kind of concept, all these ideas, all these new strategies, some of them existed but were not very well known. Some of them didn't really exist. So people are just better and they're harder to beat.
You became world champion in a time when poker grew a lot in the world, and you and especially Chris Moneymaker and Joe Hashim were some kind of icons for the game. Do you think that affect how people play against you when you're sitting at a table because everybody knows who you are?
It has a big impact. That seems to be decreasing. Again, when you play against the amateur player, the person who's either there in that tournament because they got lucky in a satellite, won their seat on PokerStars or something, those guys show up and they don't expect to win. They know they're not that good. But then when they're at your table, me or Chris or Joe or someone else they know really well from television, they don't want to fold. Because that's not a story. Greg raised my big blind and I folded is not the story they go home and tell their friends. But it's like, no, I called him with 5-3, and the flop came King, Queen, 5, and for some reason I decided he might have Ace-Jack or Ace-10, so I didn't fold, and then I spiked a 5 on the turn, and I beat Greg's Ace-King. And now they've got a story to take home and tell their friends. So if they fold, not a good story. If they play the pot, even if I knock them out and win all their chips, they go home and their friends say, how did you do? And they're like, well, they got me, they knocked me out, but it took a world champ to do it. So, they want that story. But now we're seeing fewer of these complete amateur players. And the same thing when I come to Europe, I don't see hardly any players of that sort. So now, the people have been playing pretty seriously. This is not their first big event. They're not going to go brag to their friends about how they knocked me out. because you go tell your buddy how you knocked me out of the tournament, and he's going to say, well, I knocked him out of EPT Monte Carlo 2 years ago. Big whoop. You know, it's, in other words, it's been there, done that, because they're more professional.
We have a quite strong field here in EPT London, and a lot of young internet players who play thousands of hands a week and almost an hour nowadays with rush poker and all that stuff. What do you think are your edge in a field like this?
Well, my advantage is that I've been playing for 18 years and I've been a live player, obviously, that entire time. And now I've become an internet player as well, but the first half of my poker career there was no internet to play on. Not to play poker. So I have a lot more experience than almost everyone in this field at reading live tells. And so even though these are good players who have learned to hide their tells, no one's perfect in that regard. Not me, not anyone. And so there's always something there to be seen if you have got enough practice and experience and can spot it. So, you know, I think I'm going to hide my tells more effectively because I've been doing that for 18 years, and I'm going to read their tells more effectively. So I'm not saying it's going to be easy. It's just I have a small edge in that regard.
Okay, thanks a lot and good luck in the EPT, Greg Raymer.
Cheers. Thank you very much.